March 14th, 1945. Eastern Germany. The sky over the Oder River bridgehead hung grey and silent, stretched thin like old canvas across the industrial sprawl below. Soviet forces had crossed the river 3 days prior, and now German supply columns bled eastward in broken lines, desperate to resupply the fragmenting Wehrmacht positions before the final collapse. Lieutenant Heinrich Volker sat in the cockpit of his Focke-Wulf FW-190 F8, engine idling, gloved hands resting on the control column. Around him, 11 other fighter-bombers waited in loose formation on the frost-scarred airstrip of Cottbus Nord. The morning briefing had been brief. 23 identified targets, bridges, convoys, artillery concentrations, all within a 60-kilometer corridor. Volker was 24 years old. He had flown 217 combat sorties since 1943, attacking ground targets across 3 fronts. He understood the mathematics of dive bombing better than most men understood their own names. The standard doctrine called for a 60-degree dive angle. At that pitch, a pilot could hold visual contact with the target while maintaining enough altitude to pull out safely, release the ordnance at 800 meters, pull back hard, climb, return to base. The Luftwaffe had refined this technique across 4 years of mechanized warfare, tested it over Spain, Poland, France, Russia. It worked. It kept pilots alive, but it also meant 1 bomb per dive, 1 pass, 1 chance, and on this morning, with Soviet armor already visible on the horizon and fuel reserves shrinking by the hour, 1 chance per target would not be enough. Volker had done the arithmetic in his head during the briefing. 12 aircraft, 23 targets. Each plane carried 2 SC-250 bombs beneath the wings and a centerline rack loaded with 4 SC-50 fragmentation munitions, standard load, standard tactics. At best, they might neutralize 14 targets before exhausting ordnance and fuel. The rest would roll forward unchallenged. The squadron commander had said nothing about this gap. He simply read the coordinates and dismissed them to their planes. Volker throttled up. The BMW 801 radial engine roared, 18 cylinders hammering in synchronized violence. Ice crystals scattered off the cowling. He released the brakes. The Focke-Wulf surged forward, tail lifting, wheels drumming over frozen earth until the ground fell away and the aircraft climbed into the pale morning light. Formation took shape around him, 12 fighters rising together, ordnance slung beneath their bellies like the eggs of steel predators. They banked east, following the rail line toward the front. Below, the landscape unrolled in monochrome, fields striped with tank tracks, villages reduced to skeletal frameworks, roads choked with refugees and retreating soldiers. Volker checked his instruments. Altitude, 4,000 meters. Airspeed, 380 kilometers per hour. Fuel, sufficient for 90 minutes of flight time. He had flown this route so many times that he could navigate by the shapes of shadows alone. The radio crackled. The squadron leader's voice, clipped and professional, identifying the first target. A supply convoy moving south along Highway 112. Approximately 15 vehicles, mixed trucks and half-tracks. Volker banked right, descending in a shallow spiral, scanning the road network below until he spotted the convoy. Dust trail first. Then the dark shapes of vehicles crawling like beetles through the rubble of a bombed-out town. He rolled inverted, pulled the nose down. 60 degrees. The earth rushed up, filling the canopy. Airspeed climbed. 500 kilometers per hour. 600. The convoy grew larger, individual vehicles resolving into clarity, canvas-topped trucks, a fuel tanker, 2 half-tracks with soldiers clinging to the sides. Volker centered the sight reticle over the lead truck. Altitude, 1,000 meters, 900, 800. He pressed the release. The SC-250 bomb separated cleanly, tumbling forward through the slipstream, fins stabilizing its descent. He pulled back hard on the stick. 4 Gs. 5. The horizon spun, and the sky returned to its proper place above him. He did not see the impact. He heard it through the airframe, a muffled thump transmitted through pressure waves and metal. 1 bomb, 1 vehicle destroyed. 14 trucks continued south. Volker climbed back to altitude, rejoining the formation. The squadron moved to the second target, an artillery battery dug into the outskirts of a forest. He dove again, released, pulled out, climbed. 2 bombs expended, 2 targets engaged. 21 remained. By the time they reached the 5th target, Volker had used all his heavy ordnance. The centerline rack still held 4 SC-50s, but those were fragmentation bombs, devastating against personnel, nearly useless against armored vehicles or fortified positions. He climbed away from his last pass and looked down at the battlefield. Smoke rose from half a dozen points where his squadron had struck, but the larger picture remained unchanged. Convoys still moved, bridges still stood, artillery still fired. The Wehrmacht was bleeding out in slow motion, and there was nothing 12 fighter bombers could do to stop it. Volker leveled off at 3,000 meters, throttle back, fuel gauge dropping steadily toward empty. His hands rested on the control column, fingers drumming lightly against the worn leather grips. He thought about angles. The squadron returned to Cottbus Nord at 8:47 hours. Volker taxied to his dispersal point, shut down the engine, and climbed out into the cold morning air. Ground crew swarmed the aircraft immediately, checking for damage, preparing to rearm and refuel. The debriefing was brief. The squadron leader asked for confirmation of targets hit. Volker reported 5 strikes, 3 trucks destroyed, 1 artillery piece damaged, 1 bridge approach cratered. The other pilots reported similar results. In total, the squadron had engaged 17 of 23 targets. Not enough. Never enough. Volker walked back to the operations tent, removed his flight gear, and sat down at a wooden table cluttered with maps and empty coffee cups. He pulled a notebook from his jacket pocket and began writing, numbers first. The FW-190 F-8 could carry 6 bombs in standard ground attack configuration. At 60-degree dive angle, a pilot could reliably engage 1 target per bomb. 6 targets maximum per sortie, but fuel consumption limited effective operational time to 90 minutes, and that assumed no combat, no evasion, no unexpected delays. 6 targets, 90 minutes. The arithmetic was unforgiving. Volker tapped his pencil against the notebook, staring at the numbers. Then he wrote a question. What if the dive angle changed? The doctrine specified 60 degrees because it balanced accuracy with safety. Steeper dives increased speed and reduced exposure time, but also compressed the pilot's reaction window. Pull out too late, and the ground would kill you faster than any anti-aircraft fire. But steeper dives also meant more bombs per pass. Volker sketched a rough diagram. A standard 60-degree dive allowed the pilot to track 1 target, release ordnance, and recover. But if the angle increased to 70 degrees, or 75, the aircraft would cover more vertical distance in less time. The pilot would pass through multiple attack windows during a single dive. He wrote, multiple releases, single dive. It was insane. The human body could only process so much information during high-speed descent, identifying targets, calculating lead, releasing ordnance, adjusting for wind and drift. All of this required precision and focus. Attempting it multiple times in rapid succession, while the Earth screamed toward you at 700 kilometers per hour, violated every principle of survival that Volker had learned over 4 years of war. But the mathematics were compelling. If a pilot could release 2 bombs during 1 dive, he doubled his efficiency. If he could release 3, he tripled it. 6 bombs, 6 targets, all in a single pass. No wasted altitude, no wasted time. Volker closed the notebook and walked outside. The airstrip stretched before him, grey and flat under the overcast sky. Maintenance crews worked on the parked aircraft, refueling hoses snaking across the tarmac, bomb trolleys positioned beneath wings. In the distance, smoke rose from the front lines, dark pillars marking the places where men and machines burned. He thought about the convoy from that morning. 15 vehicles. He had destroyed one. 14 continued south, carrying ammunition and fuel to positions that would use those supplies to kill Allied soldiers tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. 1 bomb per dive. It was not enough. It had never been enough. Volker returned to the operations tent and found the squadron engineer, a greying sergeant named Dieter Kohl, who had been maintaining Luftwaffe aircraft since before the war began. "I need to test something," Volker said. Kohl looked up from the engine schematic spread across his workbench. "Test what?" "A new dive profile. Steeper angle. Multiple releases." Kohl frowned. "How steep?" 75 degrees, maybe 80. The engineer stared at him for several seconds. Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You'll black out, or hit the ground. Probably both." "Maybe," Volker said, "but if it works, I can hit 3 times as many targets per sortie." Kohl stopped laughing. He studied Volker's face, searching for signs of madness or desperation. He found both, and something else beneath them: calculation. "You'll need to adjust the bomb release mechanism," Kohl said slowly. "Standard intervals won't work at that speed. You'll overshoot between drops." "Can you do it?" Kohl wiped his hands on a rag, thinking, "I can modify the intervalometer, reduce the delay between releases, but it's dangerous. If one bomb fails to separate cleanly, it could collide with the next drop. You'll destroy the aircraft and yourself." "Understood," Volker said. Kohl sighed. "When do you want to test it?" "Tomorrow morning, early." The engineer nodded. "I'll have the aircraft ready by 0600. That night, Volker sat alone in the barracks, sketching dive profiles by the light of a single kerosene lamp. Most of the other pilots were asleep, sprawled across narrow cots in various states of exhaustion. The air smelled of tobacco smoke and damp wool. He drew lines on graph paper, calculating angles and velocities, estimating release points for sequential bomb drops. The physics were straightforward. Higher speed meant less time to react, but also meant bombs would travel farther forward before arming. If he released too early, the ordnance would sail past the target. Too late, and he would not have enough altitude to recover. The margin for error was measured in fractions of a second. Volker set down his pencil and closed his eyes, visualizing the dive. Nose down, 75 degrees, Earth rushing up, first target, release, second target, release, third target, release, pull back, recover, climb. It was possible, barely. He opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling, listening to the distant rumble of artillery. Somewhere out there, soldiers were dying because fighter bombers could not hit enough targets fast enough. The war was already lost. Everyone knew that. But men were still bleeding into frozen mud, still screaming for medics, still burning inside shattered tanks. 1 bomb per dive, not enough. Volker folded the graph paper and tucked it into his jacket. Tomorrow, he would find out if mathematics could outrun death. March 15th, 1945. 06:04 hours. Cottbus Nord airstrip. The modified Focke-Wulf sat alone on the flight line. Bombs already loaded, fuel tanks topped off. Volker walked a slow circle around the aircraft, inspecting the ordnance racks, checking control surfaces, running his hand along the cold metal skin. Kohl stood nearby, smoking a cigarette, watching him with the wary expression of a man who had just armed a device he did not fully trust. "Intervalometer is set to 0.7-second delays," Kohl said. "Be fast enough to drop 3 bombs in sequence during a single dive, assuming you hold the release button down. But you need to be precise. If your angle shifts even 5 degrees between drops, the trajectory changes. You could miss everything." Volker nodded. "Understood." "And if you black out?" I won't. Cole dropped the cigarette and ground it under his boot. You're insane. Probably, Volker said. He climbed into the cockpit, settled into the seat, and began the pre-flight checklist. Fuel, full. Oil pressure, normal. Magnetos, check. Control surfaces, responsive. He closed the canopy and signaled the ground crew. The BMW 801 engine coughed, caught, roared. Volker released the brakes and rolled forward, gathering speed across the frozen strip until the tail lifted and the wheels left the ground. He climbed east, alone, into the grey pre-dawn light. The target area lay 30 kilometers ahead, a stretch of abandoned farmland where the Wehrmacht had established a training ground before the war. Old tank hulks still littered the fields, rusted and overgrown, perfect for testing accuracy without risking friendly forces or drawing enemy fire. Volker circled the area once, identifying 3 hulks spaced roughly 200 meters apart in a diagonal line. He climbed to 4,000 meters, leveled off, and took several deep breaths. His heart rate was elevated, adrenaline already flooding his system. He forced himself to slow down, to think clearly. This was not combat. This was mathematics. He rolled inverted and pulled the nose down. The artificial horizon tilted. The earth appeared above him, inverted, then rotated as he continued the roll until it filled the canopy entirely. 75 degrees. He checked the inclinometer. Exactly 75. Airspeed climbed rapidly. 400 kilometers per hour, 500, 600. The first tank hulk appeared in his sight reticle, growing larger with terrifying speed. Altitude, 1,000 meters, 900, 800. He pressed the bomb release button and held it down. The first SC-50 separated. The aircraft jolted slightly. He kept the nose steady, tracking forward along the diagonal line. 700 meters, 650, second release, another jolt. The reticle passed over the second hulk, 600 meters, 550, third release, final jolt, 500 meters. Volker pulled back on the stick with every gram of strength he possessed. The G's hit him like a physical blow. Vision tunneled. Grey edges crept inward. The horizon reappeared, spinning. He held the pull. 4 Gs. 5. 6. The Focke-Wulf shuddered, metal groaning, and then the nose lifted and the sky returned and he was climbing again, vision clearing, hands trembling. Altitude 400 meters. He had recovered with less than 3 seconds to spare. Volker banked left, circling back over the target area, breathing hard. Below, 3 columns of smoke rose from the farmland, spaced evenly along the diagonal line. He descended to 1,000 meters and made a low pass. The first bomb had struck 10 meters short of the first hulk. The second had hit directly on top of the second hulk, tearing a fresh crater through the rusted metal. The third had landed 15 meters beyond the third hulk. Not perfect, but functional. 3 bombs, 3 targets, 1 dive. Volker climbed back to altitude and repeated the test twice more, adjusting his release timing, refining his technique. By the third pass, he had reduced the margin of error to less than 8 meters, close enough for combat conditions. He turned west and returned to Cottbus Nord. Cole was waiting on the flight line when Volker shut down the engine. The engineer climbed up onto the wing and opened the canopy. "Well?" Volker handed him the notebook, open to the page where he had sketched the impact patterns. Cole studied the diagrams in silence. "It works," Volker said. Cole looked up, his expression unreadable. "How many times are you going to do this before it kills you?" "As many as it takes." The engineer shook his head slowly. "You're going to die, Heinrich. Maybe not today, but soon." "Everyone dies," Volker said. "But I'd rather die hitting 19 targets than 6. That afternoon, Volker presented his findings to the squadron leader. A major named Ernst Baumann, who had flown Stukas over Poland in 1939 and survived long enough to transition to fighters when the dive bombers became death traps. Baumann listened in silence as Volker described the modified dive profile, the reduced intervalometer delays, the test results. When Volker finished, Baumann lit a cigarette and stared at the map on the wall. "This violates every safety protocol we have," Baumann said. "Yes, sir. If you black out during the dive, you'll die. If the bombs collide during release, you'll die. If you misjudge the recovery altitude by even 50 meters, you'll die." "Yes, sir." Baumann exhaled smoke. "How many targets can you hit with this method?" 3 per dive. "If I carry 6 bombs and make 2 dives, I can engage 6 targets per sortie. If fuel and ordnance allow for 3 dives, I can hit 9, maybe more." Baumann turned away from the map and looked at Volker directly. "Tomorrow, we have 31 confirmed targets. Soviet supply lines moving through the Spree River Valley, convoys, bridges, fuel depots, high priority. If your technique works in combat conditions, it could change the operational mathematics." "I know, sir. And if it doesn't work, I lose my best ground attack pilot." Volker said nothing. Baumann stubbed out the cigarette. "You're authorized for combat testing. Tomorrow morning. Full ordnance load. But you fly alone until we confirm the results. I won't risk the entire squadron on an unproven tactic." "Understood, sir." "Dismissed." Volker saluted and left the operations tent. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the airstrip. Mechanics worked under floodlights, preparing aircraft for the next day's missions. In the distance, artillery rumbled, a constant low thunder that never quite stopped. He walked back to the barracks and lay down on his cot, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, he would discover whether mathematics could survive contact with war. He closed his eyes and waited for morning. March 16th, 1945. 05:42 hours. Eastern Germany. The Focke-Wulf lifted off into darkness, navigation lights extinguished, engine howling against the silence of the pre-dawn sky. Volker climbed to 4,000 meters and turned southeast, following the Spree River toward the Soviet supply corridor. He carried 6 SC-50 fragmentation bombs on the centerline rack and 2 SC-250 general-purpose bombs under the wings, 8 targets, possibly 9, if he could manage a third dive without exhausting fuel reserves. The river appeared below him as a pale ribbon winding through the black landscape. Dawn was still 20 minutes away. He would attack in twilight, using the low light to mask his approach, while retaining enough visibility to identify targets. The first target complex appeared at 05:58 hours. A supply convoy moving west along a secondary road. 12 vehicles clustered near a damaged bridge where engineers worked to restore the span. Volker descended to 3,500 meters and began a wide orbit, studying the layout. Trucks parked in 2 groups, bridge in the center. Engineers concentrated on the southern approach. He rolled inverted, 75 degrees. Nose down. Airspeed climbed. The convoy expanded in his sight reticle. First target, the lead truck in the northern group. He centered the reticle, waited for altitude to drop below 1,000 meters, and pressed the release button. First bomb away. Slight jolt. He adjusted the nose fractionally left. Second truck, 800 meters, held the button. Second bomb away. Adjusted right. Bridge approach, 700 meters. Third bomb away. 600 meters. Volker pulled back. Hard. The G's crushed him into the seat. Vision grayed. He held the pull, counting seconds, waiting for the horizon to reappear. It did, barely. He climbed, banked left, and looked back. 3 columns of smoke rose from the convoy. The northern truck group was shattered. The bridge approach cratered. The second truck group scattered. Vehicles reversing wildly to escape the impact zone. 3 targets. 1 dive. Volker checked his instruments. Fuel, 70%. Ordnance, 5 bombs remaining. He climbed back to altitude and continued southeast. The second target appeared at 6:14 hours. A fuel depot hidden in a forest clearing. 4 tanker trucks parked around a central pump station. Volker descended to 3,000 meters. The clearing was small, heavily wooded. Precision required. He rolled inverted. 80 degrees this time. Steeper, faster, less margin for error. Nose down. The trees blurred into a single dark mass. The clearing appeared as a pale gap. Tanker trucks, 4 of them, lined up, 1,000 meters. First release, jolt, 900 meters. Second release, jolt, 800 meters. Third release, jolt, 700 meters. Pull, now. He hauled back on the stick. 7 Gs, 8. Vision collapsed into a narrow tunnel. His lungs fought for air. The horizon appeared, tilted crazily, then stabilized. Altitude, 350 meters. He banked hard and looked back. The forest clearing erupted in a single massive fireball as fuel tankers ignited sequentially. Black smoke boiled upward, visible for kilometers. 3 more targets destroyed. Volker climbed to altitude and continued his patrol. Fuel, 55%. Ordnance, 2 SC-250 bombs under the wings. The third target appeared at 0629 hours. An artillery battery positioned on a hillside. 4 guns dug into reinforced emplacements. Ammunition stored in trenches behind the firing line. Volker descended to 2,800 meters. He would use the heavy bombs for this. 2 targets, 1 dive, final pass. He rolled inverted, 75 degrees. The hillside rushed up. The artillery positions appeared as dark rectangles against pale earth. He centered the reticle on the first gun emplacement, 1,000 meters. First SC-250 released. The aircraft lurched as 250 kilograms of high explosive dropped away. 900 meters, adjusted slightly right. Second emplacement, 800 meters. Second SC-250 released, 700 meters. Pull. The Gs hit him like falling into concrete. His vision collapsed entirely. He pulled blindly, trusting muscle memory, counting seconds. When his vision returned, he was climbing through 1,500 meters, the horizon steady above him. He banked and looked back. Both artillery positions erupted simultaneously. Secondary explosions rippled through the ammunition trenches. The hillside collapsed inward, burying the guns under tons of earth. 2 more targets destroyed. Volker leveled off and checked his instruments. Fuel, 40%. Ordnance, expended. Time, 0634 hours. He had been airborne for 52 minutes. He had engaged 8 targets across 3 combat dives, destroying trucks, fuel depots, and artillery positions. Standard doctrine would have required 8 separate passes, 8 separate exposures to anti-aircraft fire, 8 chances to die. But the mission was not finished. Volker turned southeast again, climbing back to altitude. Below, the landscape continued to reveal itself in the growing dawn light. Roads crowded with vehicles, rail lines choked with supply trains, bridges spanning rivers and ravines, targets everywhere, and no ordnance remaining. Volker keyed his radio. Control, this is Adler 7. 8 targets destroyed. Returning to base for rearm and refuel. Request immediate turnaround authorization. Static hissed for several seconds. Then Baumann's voice crackled through. Adler 7. Confirm count. 8 targets. Confirmed, sir. 3 combat dives. Multiple releases per dive. Silence. Then, authorization granted. Return immediately. We'll have the aircraft ready. Volker turned west and descended toward Cottbus Nord. The sun was rising behind him now, casting long shadows across the frozen earth. He could see smoke rising from a dozen points along the front lines, some from his strikes, others from ongoing battles that never paused, never stopped, never gave anyone time to breathe. He landed at 0651 hours. Ground crew swarmed the aircraft before he could shut down the engine. Cole appeared on the wing, shouting over the roar of the motor. "Major wants you airborne again in 20 minutes. We're loading full ordnance." Volker nodded, too exhausted to reply. He climbed out of the cockpit, drank half a canteen of water, and walked a slow circle around the Focke-Wulf while the crew worked. Fuel hoses, bomb trolleys, armorers checking release mechanisms, everything moving with frantic precision. 18 minutes later, he climbed back into the cockpit. The second sortie launched at 072 hours. Volker flew southeast again, retracing his earlier route, searching for new targets. The Soviet supply lines stretched endlessly, a sprawling network of logistics that fed the advancing front like blood vessels feeding muscle. He found 11 more targets before his fuel gauge dropped into the red zone. 2 more convoys, 1 ammunition dump, 1 command post, 3 bridges, 4 individual trucks caught moving through open terrain, 11 targets, 4 combat dives, multiple releases per dive. By the time he landed at EO 847 hours, his hands were shaking so violently he could barely grip the control column. He taxied to his dispersal point, shut down the engine, and sat in the cockpit for several minutes, unable to move. Cole climbed up and opened the canopy. "You're done," the engineer said firmly. "No third sortie. You'll kill yourself." Volker shook his head. "How many targets are left?" "That's not the point." "How many?" Cole sighed. "At least 15. But rearm the aircraft." "Heinrich, rearm it." Cole stared at him for a long moment. Then he climbed down and signaled the ground crew. The third sortie launched at EO 923 hours. Volker was beyond exhaustion now, operating on adrenaline and will alone. His vision blurred at the edges. His reaction slowed, but the mathematics still worked. He found the remaining targets scattered across the corridor, isolated vehicles, small supply caches, observation posts overlooking river crossings. He dove on them methodically, one after another, releasing ordnance with mechanical precision. 3 more targets destroyed, then 2 more, then 1 final artillery position hidden in a tree line, its crew scrambling as the Focke-Wulf screamed out of the sky at 700 kilometers per hour. Final bomb released, final pull, final recovery. Volker climbed away from the target area, engine sputtering, fuel gauge reading empty. He turned west and began a shallow glide toward Cottbus Nord, trading altitude for distance, nursing every last drop of fuel from the tanks. He crossed the airfield threshold at 10:41 hours, engine coughing, wheels touching down on fumes. The Focke-Wulf rolled to a stop 200 meters short of the dispersal area. The engine died. Silence descended. Volker sat in the cockpit, staring at nothing, while ground crew ran toward him across the tarmac. The debriefing lasted 4 minutes. Volker reported his strikes, confirmed target destruction, and described the dive technique. Baumann listened without interruption. When Volker finished, the major consulted a list on his desk. 19 confirmed targets destroyed. Baumann said quietly, "In 1 day, by 1 pilot." "Yes, sir." Standard doctrine would have required 19 separate sorties, 19 pilots. 19 aircraft. "Yes, sir." Baumann set down the list and looked at Volker. "This changes operational planning. If we can train the squadron to use your technique, we can triple our effectiveness with existing resources." Volker said nothing. He was too tired to process what that meant. "Get some rest," Baumann said. "Tomorrow, you'll teach the others." Volker saluted and left the operations tent. Outside, the sun was high and bright, the sky clear for the first time in weeks. He walked back to the barracks, lay down on his cot, and fell asleep instantly. He did not dream. Unit After Action Report, Jagdgeschwader, 77, March 16, 1945. Subject, Combat Effectiveness Analysis of Modified Dive Bombing Technique. At 0542 hours, Lieutenant Heinrich Volker executed 3 combat sorties utilizing non-standard dive profiles, incorporating multiple ordnance releases per descent. Method resulted in engagement of 19 confirmed targets over 7 hours operational time. Technique subsequently adopted by squadron elements with measurable increase in target destruction rates. Casualties, 0. Operational note. Pilot exhibited extreme physical stress markers post-mission. Medical officer recommends 48-hour recovery period before further combat operations. Recommendation overruled by operational necessity. Technique designated for immediate dissemination to all ground attack units, Eastern Front. This method represents significant tactical innovation under resource-constrained conditions. Historical analysis suggests similar approaches may have altered engagement mathematics across multiple theaters had implementation occurred earlier in conflict timeline. Report filed March 17, 1945. Cottbus Nord Air Station. Classification: restricted.